I'm going to be detailing the setup that I have on my WASR 1063, discussing a couple parts that I've swapped out and a couple modifications that I've done. Then I'll be going through a parts list on this build, and then I will backtrack and go over every individual part. I found this rifle to be an excellent entry-level AK. It's always run 100%, absolutely zero issues, and it's just as accurate as any other 7.62x39 rifle that I own. This rifle must have cycled through the Century Arms plant after 2008, which is when they increased their quality control there. It has a couple small plates welded inside the mag well, which pretty much eliminates the mag wobble. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is go over a few things that I did to the interior of this rifle. The first one being, when I first purchased this rifle and got it on my workbench and disassembled it, I noticed that the firing pin was slightly rusted and a little bit dimpled, so I actually replaced that with a new one. Then I took out the old shepherd's hook and replaced that for a Tapco retaining plate. And then the last thing I did on the interior was I lightly sanded the rails. Next thing I'm going to do is run down a parts list for the exterior of the rifle, from the buttstock to the muzzle brake. Alright, so starting in the back there, I have a Magpul CTR stock with a extended recoil pad. On top I have a 3/4 inch cheek riser. Right in front of that is a Noveske QD end plate installed on top of a Rifle Dynamics buffer tube adapter. Right in front of that adapter is a Hogue overmolded grip. Right in front of the grip is a Tapco G2 trigger, which came pre-installed on this rifle. Moving forward on the rifle, up front I have a Midwest Industries extended handguard installed. On the bottom of that handguard is a Magpul AFG2. Right above that is a Magpul QD sling mount. Right in front of that mount I have a set of Magpul Picatinny rail covers installed. Further up the rail I have a Surefire Tactical G2x on a QD mount. On the front of the Surefire I have a Monstrum rubberized objective lens cover. The optic that's installed on top there is a Sightmark CSR Wolverine with a kill flash installed on it. The sighting system that I have on this rifle is a set of Kensight fiber optic rear adjustable sights. The muzzle brake up front is a typical A2 birdcage, and the one part that you can't see from this angle, on the other side I have a Wbp flat paneled safety selector installed. The first thing that I'm going to talk in detail about is going to be the buttstock setup on this. The CTR is definitely my favorite. The only issue I have with this setup is that the Magpul riser can be fairly difficult to get off. My fix for this was to actually create a mod using a piece of paracord. In essence, what I did was created a pull handle for it. I actually have that detailed on a video on my page if you're interested. But with that mod, it comes off pretty quick and pretty easy. Moving on, there's not too much to say about the Noveske QD end plate. It does what it's supposed to do and does it well. So on to the Rifle Dynamics buffer tube adapter. This was actually the second adapter that I tried. The first one was the Strike Industries. I found that adapter to be too low and too long. I found the Rifle Dynamics to be the perfect height. It was just high enough to be able to accommodate a 3/4 inch riser to get me to my optic, and then without the riser on be just low enough to where it sat in my natural cheek position to pick up my irons. Next thing I'm going to talk about is the Hogue grip. And this is a very personal thing whether you like a rubberized grip or you don't. And I've heard the discussion where people were saying that when rubber gets wet, it gets slippery. But I've also seen research showing combat vets putting pieces of inner tube on their grips out in the field to utilize. So in the end, this is what I prefer, and this is the path that I took. It was my original intent to add a stealth gray Magpul K2 Plus to this rifle when I started adding color to it. but I could not sacrifice how natural this felt in my hand just to get that little bit of extra color on my grip. I am going to take a second to talk about the Tapco G2 trigger that's on this rifle, even though I didn't install it myself. I actually liked this so much that I went out and purchased a second one to install on another build that I was doing. It has about a 3.5 pound trigger pull. It's very smooth, and considering the price, it's very impressive. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the extended Midwest Industries handguard that I have mounted on the front of this rifle. This is actually surprisingly light for its size. It's actually a bit lighter than the extended Magpul Zukov handguard. And with all the rail space on this, it gives you a ton of options for mounting accessories. On the bottom of the handguard, you can see I have a Magpul AFG2 installed. I personally like having an angled foregrip for a couple different reasons. One being I can put my finger out front of that forward ledge and use that to pull the rifle back into my shoulder to try and control the recoil impulse. And if you're really running this gun a lot, it'll tend to get really hot, and this is just one more thing to keep your hand away from the heat. I like to mount my angled foregrips in their most rearward positions as long as it doesn't affect me rocking my mags in and out. So I have a couple reasons for this. The first one being is I tend to hold my rifles in more of a traditional manner instead of having my left hand way out front like I'm driving the rifle. So the AFG being further back is just more comfortable for me. Secondly, when I set up a flashlight on a rifle like this, I don't like to have pressure switches or wires running all over my handguard, so I try to make it so that my thumb only has to make a small adjustment to activate my flashlight. Moving up to the Magpul QD sling mount, the only thing I can say about this product is that in the past I've bought eBay specials trying to save $1 and in the end wasted money. I've had QDs just randomly pop out at random times. So my suggestion here would be to just bite the bullet and purchase a brand that you know and trust, and then you never have to worry about problems like that. Right in front of the sling mount, you can see I have some Magpul Picatinny rail covers installed. I definitely have more than I need on this build, and I pretty much did that for color. They hardly weigh anything. One thing that I will mention here though is that I found it important to install one in front of my AFG on the bottom due to the fact that the way I hold my AFG, my pointer finger actually comes in contact with the Picatinny in the front. Another thing I'd like to mention while I'm in this area is that you can see I don't have anything covering the Picatinny on the bottom rail towards the front. And the reason for that is I like to use a bipod while I'm bench rest shooting this rifle. Moving on to the Surefire G2x that I have mounted. I consider this flashlight to be your best bang for your buck. This product's been tested by professionals, and if you don't need the latest, smallest, lightest flashlight on the market that might cost you a couple $100, this thing will definitely get the job done and not break the bank doing it. I personally prefer the tactical version of this flashlight just because of it only having the momentary on and the high setting. I feel like if I'm ever in a situation, I don't want to be fumbling around figuring out what setting I'm on. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is going to be the only controversial thing that's in this video, and that is going to be the Monstrum objective lens cover that I have on the front of my flashlight. And the reason I installed this was the day that I installed my kill flash on my red dot, I was sitting there looking at my rifle and I was thinking, it's odd that I'm covering up one lens and there sits my flashlight out front. So my reasoning for this is twofold. First being, just like the kill flash, you're not giving away your location in daylight. And the second one being, if you're running through brush or something like that, your lens of your flashlight's protected. I actually have this mounted upside down, so that way when I deploy the lens cover, it actually falls out of my field of view. And this thing seems like it actually belongs there. It's actually rubberized, so it slips on almost like a sock, and it fits very well. That Surefire flashlight is mounted in a Modkin aluminum QD mount that I purchased off of Amazon. I personally prefer all my flashlights to be on QD mounts just for the fact that I might not want to point my rifle at something that I'm going to want to illuminate. Moving on to my optic, that is a Sightmark CSR Wolverine with a 4 MOA dot. Some of the features of this optic include a QD mount. It's wrapped in like a rubberized armor. It accepts a kill flash. It has protected and connected turret caps. It's waterproof. It's shockproof. It has a 50,000 hour battery life from a accessible AA battery, and it has an auto shutoff. This is another product that I consider to be in the class of best bang for your buck. I've seen this thing run through some pretty severe torture tests, and it's always held up very well. I've personally had this on some shotguns, some ARs, and my 7.62x39 platform rifles, and it has never failed me once. The one downside to this optic is that it weighs over 10 ounces. So that is about 2.5 times the weight of a TRS-25. Next thing I'm going to talk about is the Wbp Safety Selector. I originally had the Kreb Safety Selector installed on this, and when I seen this flat paneled selector come out, I knew I was going to purchase it. After so many trips to the range, I was really getting the blues of having that C-shaped panel dig into my finger every time I snapped my safety on. And I find this selector very intuitive to use. So you throw your fingers up there and the flat panel just falls right in between your middle finger and your pointer finger. It just feels very natural. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the KenSight fiber optic rear adjustable sight system that I have on this rifle. When I bought this rifle, I thought I knew how to check for canted sights on an AK, but it turned out that my sights were slightly canted on this rifle. Not so much that I couldn't zero in my iron sights, but they were canted just enough to make my front post be pushed off so far to the left that it irritated me. Now, I could have got away with leaving them alone. They would have worked just fine. I actually could have got away with going with one of the cheaper $50 rear adjustable sights, but I went for the KenSights. I liked the sight picture that they had on them. I think the only downside to a system like this would be that in a SHTF situation, the fiber optics might not last. And even if that would happen, you'd really just be going back to black on black blade sights. So I really don't see that being that big of a deal. The last part I'm going to talk about is the muzzle device. After spending a lot of time and money in search of the perfect muzzle device, I've come to the conclusion that there isn't one. In my experience, you can either have a good compensator or you can have a good flash hider, but you can't have both. With a good compensator, you're going to give up your flash hiding capabilities, and you're going to have some serious side port concussions, which the guy standing next to you is not going to appreciate too much. And if you choose to go with a good flash hider, which most likely will be like a 4-prong flash hider, you're going to get minimal compensation, and if you're laying prone, you're going to get dust kicking up off the ground. So in my opinion, the A2 does a decent job at both of these things, and it doesn't break the bank when you purchase it. So on my builds going forward, this is the path that I'm going to take. Alright, I think that's going to conclude my thoughts on the setup of my WASR 1063. I hope someone out there got something out of it. Feel free to leave your questions and comments. Stay safe and God bless.